The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Huge fallout from the anti-gay so-called religious freedom law in Indiana that Republican Governor Mike Pence signed into law last week. Businesses and municipalities are pulling cash and pulling jobs from Indiana after the passage of the anti-gay bill, and it is very good news. San Francisco Mayor Edwin Lee, for example, who's a Democrat, directed all city departments under his authority to ban publicly funded travel to Indiana. Quote, "We stand united as San Franciscans to condemn Indiana's new discriminatory law. San Francisco taxpayers will not subsidize legally sanctioned discrimination against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people by the state of Indiana." Businesses, Angie's List, announced they are canceling a $40 million headquarters expansion in Indiana. It would have added 1,000 jobs. By the way, Indiana does not have jobs to spare. This would have been a very good thing for Indiana. Quote from co-founder and CEO Bill Esterly, "Angie's List is open to all and discriminates against none, period." Salesforce.com, their founder and CEO Mark Benioff, almost immediately announcing on Twitter that they're not going to send employees or customers to Indiana either. Quote, "Today we are canceling all programs that require our customers and employees to travel to Indiana to face discrimination." He also tweeted out, has about 150,000 followers, tweeted out that they would be drastically reducing their investment in Indiana based on outrage over this so-called religious freedom bill. Salesforce does have offices in other states that already have passed similar bills, so let's bear that in mind, but we need more companies to do this. This is bad for Indiana. Their right-wing government has left them as the 22nd most dependent state on the federal government. Indiana is not self-sufficient. If they don't receive money from the federal government, which exceeds the money that they pay into the federal government, they would be in significant financial trouble. And we have numerous companies. I just listed a few. I believe Yelp also was issued some kind of a statement about pulling back in terms of Indiana expansion or business. This is exactly what we need to have happening. These religious freedom bills are not religious freedom bills. They are bills that allow legal discrimination against groups, and this is not going to go well. As evidence of the fact that the Indiana religious freedom bill, which defenders claim is not actually going to lead to anti-gay discrimination, it turns out that that's not really true. We have audio of a business owner who appeared on the radio who says, yeah, I'm going to be discriminating against gays, and I love the fact that we have passed this law. It's a really, really great thing. We're talking, of course, of a restaurant owner in Indianapolis who is not saying who exactly he is. He went on the Kyle and Rachel show, a local morning radio show on Radio Now 100.9, and here's what he had to say.
Ryan, I believe, who's a local business owner. Good morning, Ryan. Is that right?
Yes. I don't want to say what business I own, but...
Well, I would understand that because you'd be putting yourself directly in the line of fire, I feel like.
Come on. If you're going to support this, though, tell us who you are. Why is it a big deal?
Well, you know what? I don't think I'm ready to come out of the closet, per se, to talk about this bill. But I'm 100% behind the bill.
Why?
I mean, I think, I understand people's lifestyles and what they want to do, but I don't want them bringing that into my place of business to make my other people that are there feel uncomfortable. I grew up Christian, and I believe in man and woman. I guess, Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. So,
but don't you also believe in equality too, Ryan?
Yes, I do, but not in my business where I make money and put food on the table for my family.
In general, the statement, I believe in equality, but is similar to, I don't hate black people, but, or that type of thing, right? That's not a good way to get, it's not the right foot to start off on.
How is their hard-earned dollar any different than the hard-earned dollar that, say, a heterosexual couple is going to spend with your business? How is that any different?
Well, maybe it's my ignorance, but if I look at it, if a couple comes into my place of business and it makes other people leave my place of business, well, then I'm losing more money from the people leaving than the people coming in.
Ryan, have
No, yeah, that is your ignorance, actually. Your instinct was right on that.
you actually ever discriminated against gays when they've come into your workplace? What industry do you work in, by the way?
I'm in the restaurant industry, and I have discriminated. I have not really closed early, but said something was broken in the kitchen, so that I couldn't serve them.
What do you mean? They got there and you blamed it on something going wrong with the kitchen to not serve people?
Well, I was pretty much done for the evening, and everybody was eating in the restaurant, and then these people came in later, and instead of me just making them more food, I just told them that the fan was broken, the hood suppression system fan was broken, and they left. So I have discriminated.
Quite a guy, huh?
Against them before.
Yeah, well, that's legal now, right? That's legal because he's like you said, he's a Christian. He believes in Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. And he's, whatever lifestyles people want, he's not going to have it in his business because his kids might be around. So this is a real thing. This is now going to be legal. This silly coward and his buddies are going to be able to do this. And he added that there are tons of business owners who agree with Governor Mike Pence that this is the way it should be. And I'm sure that he is right. So this is more about proving wrong the argument from the right that this really is about religious freedom. It's not to discriminate against gays, that nobody really wants to discriminate against gays. Well, that's not the case. Here's one guy who has, and now his discrimination is legal. It's pathetic. It's disgusting. And it's great that San Francisco and Yelp and Salesforce and Angie's List and who knows how many other businesses are saying we're going to either pull back in Indiana or we're going to leave altogether. And that's that. That's absolutely the right thing. Virginia is preparing to pass a law which would allow business owners to straight up ban gay people from their business simply for being gay. The Virginia bill says anyone who is seeking or holding a business license from the state of Virginia in the state can refuse service or entry to gay people on the grounds it would violate the religious or moral convictions of such people with respect to same-sex marriage or homosexual behavior. This reminds me of those no Irish need not apply signs. This reminds me of separate bathrooms for black people. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about legalizing that type of thing, which you might have thought we moved away from in this country, but no, we have not moved away from it. We are now going back to that. It would make it lawful for LGBT people to be barred from hotels, restaurants, schools, hospitals, any other premises where a good or service is exchanged by someone who dislikes their sexual orientation. You want to buy a bed with your husband? You're a gay man. You show up with your husband. You want to buy a bed? You better be able to prove that that's not really your husband, or at least make the seller think that it's not, because he might kick you out. Want to buy diapers? You show up with your same-sex partner. No diapers for you. Don't darken the door of the store again with your evil ways. This could apply to all sorts of situations. It is a toxic bill. It's being led by Virginia's insanely anti-gay lawmaker, Bob Marshall. He's the guy who tried to exclude people from the Virginia National Guard. In 2012, he tried to block the appointment of a judge, saying the would-be judge is gay. And what this really is making me think about, aside from how we are going back into some very dark times in American history that are embarrassing, but there are still elements of this country that want us to go back in that direction. If you're a gay resident of Virginia and Virginia passes this law, can you choose to have your taxes not support any of those businesses because of your moral beliefs, right? Hey, why would you help pay for the police when the police is protecting businesses' right to turn away gay people? How can anyone expect gay people to have to pay all of the taxes but to be second-class citizens? It's just insane that this is going on. What else can we say? If you're paying attention to this program, you probably already agree with me, unless you're one of the countless homophobes that listens to the program or watches and then contacts us. We have to end this. And it doesn't stop at Virginia. This goes further and further. Arkansas, the Arkansas Senate has already passed an Indiana-style anti-gay bill. We told you that last week, Republican Governor in Indiana, Mike Pence, signed into law that absurd bill that would allow businesses to refuse service to people based on their sincerely held religious beliefs about sexual orientation. Arkansas is considering a similar bill. It's HB 1222. The Arkansas Senate has already passed it. It will open the door to discrimination against LGBT people, people of color, religious minorities, women, and other minority groups. And there's this conflict that is building. So let's take a step back at legal discrimination. For the most part, we have a series of classes that are protected from discrimination. So the top layer would be race, gender, etc. There are protected classes in terms of being discriminated against by private business. Some states have added sexual orientation and gender identity to that list of protected classes. In response, some other states have said, we have a religious freedom bill which allows for certain types of discrimination if it is in line with your sincerely held religious beliefs, which of course are completely arbitrary and self-professed. Who can tell you that what you say is your religious belief actually isn't? That would be a violation of freedom of religion, interestingly enough. So then we have this kind of conflict. And ultimately, I think this is going to come down to the Supreme Court saying you cannot make state laws that ban same-sex marriage or allow discrimination against people based on sexual orientation. That's really what it's going to take, because we are now seeing this resurgence. Initially, states just wanted to ban gay marriage. That's not going that well, as you may have noticed. And soon the Supreme Court may issue a broad ruling of that. So the counter now is Hobby Lobby type arguments, RFRA type arguments around religious freedom, which may include discrimination against some of these groups. The bill is opposed in Arkansas by Walmart, by Apple, by the Arkansas Municipal League. Governor Asa Hutchinson, however, has said he would sign the bill. The religious rightists think they're special. They believe, and it's not just about religion in general. If they said any religious belief should be equally valid under the law. If your belief is that Christians are evil, you should be allowed to ban Christians from your business. If Christians believe that gay people are sinners, they should be able to ban them from the businesses. It is not like that. It is a very specific type of religious freedom, and the religious rightists think that they're special. They can opt out of whatever parts of civil law they don't like. They can claim that religion is the impetus for the discriminatory beliefs, and they think that it gives them some sort of special license to do whatever they want, regardless of what the law says. This law is lining up to hurt Arkansas's financial situation in a similar way to what's happening in Indiana. I hope that it happens if the law does indeed pass and get signed into law by the governor, Asa Hutchinson. Yelp has already said, as with Indiana, they will get out of Arkansas. Sickening. Tweet me about this, twitter.com/dpacman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our program is funded by our audience. We don't get big advertising dollars from multi-million-dollar corporations. We don't get subsidized by some big media conglomerate. We're funded directly by the audience. The audience supports our program, and you can support us through the membership program at davidpakman.com/membership. Today's new member of the day is Scott McGinnis. Scott, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. Every single member, including Scott, is keeping us on the air, and we really do appreciate everybody who, especially over the last few months, we've had a great series of membership promotions, some with the help of existing members subsidizing new memberships, and thanks to everybody who has signed up recently. It's helping us to get 2015 off to what I would consider a very, very strong start. You can also support us. If you ever shop on Amazon.com, you can go to our website, davidpakman.com, click on the Amazon banner on the right side of the page, and then bookmark that link. Whenever you shop at Amazon, use that link, and Amazon will send us a little kickback. So many people streaming Better Call Saul episodes off of Amazon through our link. I love the show. I know we talked about it either before the show launched or just after the first episode. I don't remember exactly. And Lewis isn't watching it. I'm up to date on every episode. The writing is great. Bob Odenkirk is great. Jonathan Banks, who was also in Breaking Bad, is fantastic. The character of Saul's brother, played by Michael McKean, is fantastic. If you're watching it, and I know people in our audience are watching it, send me your thoughts on it. I'm not saying it's better or worse than Breaking Bad. It's different. It's a fascinating prequel, and I'm super interested to see where they go with it. And I think that tonight is episode 8 of the season. They may only be going 10 episodes on this first season. It's incredible that the first season is almost over already. But I think that they have extended it. I think it is one of the better new shows right now on TV. And I don't really, most shows I don't find to be very good. Right now I'm only paying attention to House of Cards season 3, The Americans, which is still one of my favorite shows, Cold War stuff, fantastic, and Better Call Saul. Those are really the 3 shows I'm watching right now. Send me your thoughts. Remember, use our Amazon link for anything you buy on Amazon, including if you're just streaming TV episodes. Go to davidpakman.com and click on the Amazon banner on the right side of the page. This is a fascinating story. We've talked for years with you about the ongoing problem of churches that are violating their tax-exempt nonprofit rules by advocating around candidates or doing political discourse or doing issues lobbying with regard to usually abortion and gay marriage, and not losing their tax-exempt status, which they should. Finally, a church has lost tax-exempt status, but unfortunately it has nothing to do with political stuff. Authorities are saying in Florida that a church lost its tax-exempt status because it was hosting nude painting events and slumber parties with what they described as the sexiest ladies. This is according to property appraiser Dan Sowell, who said Panama City Beach's Life Center, a spiritual community, had its tax-exempt status stripped because authorities figured out that they were hosting these late-night spring break type parties called Amnesia the Tabernacle, starting at the end of February. The events hosted were marketed as anything but clothes, body painting parties, and slumber parties. And Sheriff Frank McKeithen told the Panama City News Herald that treating the facility as a church is a blatant slap in the face to taxpayers and authorities. Can you believe this? Churches talking about voting for candidates who are anti-abortion is the real slap in the face to the taxpayers. That is expressly forbidden according to nonprofit tax exemption laws for churches. I would say that this does make a really good point, though, which is, why is a nude painting party less valid as religious activity than drinking the metaphorical blood of your leader, right? We've come to say, hey, drinking the metaphorical blood of your leader is fine. That is what a religious organization does. But if you say, hey, our religious activity is nude painting parties, that's not valid. This is not about defending this particular church's nude painting parties, but if the state gets to decide what a church does, if it's not breaking actual rules or breaking laws, then we don't really have religious freedom, do we? This contradicts the Hobby Lobby ruling in a way. If the congregants of a church are exercising their sincerely held religious beliefs by having this naked party, who are the government officials to argue with that? Naked parties are no more or less objectively logical as far as religious beliefs or activities go as, what, believing a 600-year-old man built a huge boat, gathered 2 of each kind of animal during a flood, keeping them fed for months without any of them eating each other, eliminating types of animals, ignoring that they couldn't possibly have all of the needed food on the boat in addition to the animals themselves. That, the state has clearly decided, is a belief that is consistent with being a church. But saying, oh, we do nude painting parties isn't. Why has the government decided that one is valid and one isn't? This story, as silly as it is, shows us what is truly wrong with this tax exemption that churches, some churches that have the beliefs and activities that the state decides are okay, are afforded at the expense of taxpayers. We now have a lot more information about Germanwings Flight 9525, which crashed into the French Alps while the co-pilot was at the helm, and the captain was desperately banging on the door trying to get into the cockpit. Ultimately, it was determined that the crash was a result of deliberate action taken by 28-year-old German co-pilot Andreas Lubitz. We have since found out a lot more about the co-pilot, including he was being treated for depression, which he seems to have been hiding from his employer. He had been excused from work by his psychiatrist for a period that included the day that the crash took place, according to a source who told the Wall Street Journal this information, but ignored that advice and went to work anyway. The motive remains unclear, but someone who's familiar with the investigation said he didn't have any kind of terminal illness. That's not a factor here. And I'm starting to wonder whether we have a significant double standard here. Would this have been called a terrorist attack if it were a Muslim? If someone said the Muslim co-pilot was depressed, would the so-called patriot crowd just say, oh, okay, perfectly valid, not terrorism? Or would they say, depression or not, this was a terroristic act? We here have a white German man deliberately crashing a plane, killing everyone on board. And do we really believe that if he had been Muslim or black or Hispanic, that the neo-Nazi forums wouldn't be hysterical about this? It turns out we have a terrorist suicide perpetrated by a white German. There has been almost no discussion of this as an act of terror, no calls to look into white Germans more broadly. Can anyone argue there is no double standard? Now, let me preempt what I know will be emails I'm going to get. I'm not saying that we should be treating this as a deliberate act of terror. It may well have been related to this man's mental condition. But the reality is that millions of people are depressed and millions of people are anxious, and many of them are undergoing treatment. Not all are being told to miss work by their psychiatrist, right? So let's acknowledge that. And we would not necessarily be as quick to simply allow for that as the sole and singular explanation. As some proof of this double standard, let's look at Pat Robertson, Christian host of the 700 Club, who said, what happened here? Was this guy a Muslim? I mean, we don't understand what took place. Take a listen.
The co-pilot then takes the plane, pushes it into a dive, and crashes it. The passengers are screaming as the plane went down. The pilot is yelling. The voice recorder have got it all on tape. What a terrible tragedy. Was that co-pilot a Muslim? Was he suicidal? What was it about him? He had 630 hours flying experience, which isn't a whole lot.
Was the co-pilot a Muslim? Where does that question even come from? What was the religion of Andreas Lubitz? I think that we clearly have a double standard here, and we need to simply be aware of it. This is not about placing specific blame on one thing or another. There's an investigation. Family, friends, everyone is being talked to that was connected to Andreas Lubitz. But in terms of the initial reactions, you can't tell me there is no double standard here as far as how this is treated, because it was not a Muslim man. If you disagree with me, tell me specifically why.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's a pleasure to be joined once again by Bob Deitrick, co-owner of our great sponsor Polaris Financial Partners in Columbus, Ohio, also co-author of Bulls, Bears, and the Ballot Box. Bob, Forbes has been doing a really good job of covering what have been your correct predictions in terms of what would happen to the economy under a President Obama presidency, in part based on what's happened under other Democratic presidents in the past. So let's start broad and then narrow down. To evaluate how the economy is doing, what metrics should we be paying most attention to?
Well, first of all, David, thank you very much for having us on again. It's I greatly appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to be on your show with your guests, with your audience again. The primary metrics that we're looking at that from a macroeconomic standpoint, David, are unemployment, and we're going to see another unemployment number come out this Friday. which will be a little bit interesting because the market will be closed on Good Friday too. But unemployment is one of the key ones we're focusing on. GDP, manufacturing, service, all these different factors from a macroeconomic standpoint are what we're looking at to see whether or not the economy is improving. And it is. We've seen some very strong fundamental improvement in the economy over the last 6 years.
And let's talk a little bit about the stock market specifically. And as most of our audience knows and has heard me say, the stock market by itself is not the best indicator of how the economy is doing overall, particularly when we consider the concentration of stock ownership disproportionately amongst the wealthiest Americans. But it does tell us a lot about the confidence that different players have within the economy. So let's start with the numbers. We've had quite a remarkable run-up, have we not?
We really have, David. Since March of 2009, which was the bottom of the trough of this last cycle, the market is up between 300 and almost 400%, depending upon the index you look at. In fact, some of the indices on the mid-cap and the small-cap indices, like the Russell 2000 and the S&P 400, are up between 350 and 380%, which is pretty remarkable. In fact, this is the best rally we've had in the stock market in the last 85 years, including the rallies we had in the Reagan years in the mid-'80s and the Clinton years in the latter part of the '90s.
And very often we hear from the detractors of Democratic presidents or presidents who are more supportive of demand-side economic policy than supply-side, that the great performance, that if we can get them to admit that there has been great performance under a Democratic president, they will often say that this is because of what they describe as sort of the lag time, or the idea that the policies enacted by a supply-sider, a Republican president, take some amount of time to really take effect. You've studied this in detail. Is there anything to that?
With all due respect to them, that's total nonsense. And the notion that somehow that the things that George W. Bush did 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 years ago, or that we did when he first entered into office in 2001, are having an impact today is ridiculous. Quite frankly, the reality is this: if a Mitt Romney or a John McCain were in office today, I guarantee you they'd be taking every bit of credit for what's happened in this market. But unfortunately, when President Obama tries to take any credit for anything, they make him out to be arrogant or pretentious, or which is just ridiculous. The reality is every president should stand on what happens during his watch, or hopefully someday what happens on her watch if we get a Hillary Clinton elected in 2016. And they are the CEO of the country, and what happens they're responsible for what happens on their watch. Yes, there are some indiscriminate lag times, but they're not 5 and 6 years. They're maybe 6 months to a year. And the reality is what President Obama has done in the last 6 years is pretty remarkable, given where we started in in January of 2009 when he came into office.
What's your sense in terms of how long this run-up can be expected to continue? With regard to jobs, on the one hand, we've seen many consecutive months of 200,000 plus new non-farm jobs. I don't know offhand whether it's some kind of record, but it's been quite a run there. We've seen
it is a record.
It is a record. We've seen significant run-up of the stock market. Ultimately, there are corrections, and aside from discussing this from a sort of market timing perspective, what will it mean if and when, or more likely when, there is a slowdown in terms of jobs or the stock market?
Well, we're not seeing any sense of a slowdown presently. In fact, the reality is the economy is really improving, and it's done so in a very organic way, pretty much on its own, without the help that we generally would have from Congress or from the White House. Generally, we would have some sort of infrastructure bill that would be designed to help the economy along, but we haven't had any help at all from Congress in the last 5 or 6 years in that respect. So what's happened has been pretty much organic, which is why I think that this rally is going to last longer than some of the other rallies have in the past. This slow, methodical, gradual crawl out of a very deep hole that we got ourselves into is, in my view, the way out, as opposed to what happened during the Reagan years, that you might recall, where the market had a huge run-up between 82 and 87, and then a big crash that followed that in October of 87. I think that this rally, I know we're in the 6th year of what we think is going to be a 9 to 12 year bull market cycle. So I don't think I think we're somewhere in the 3rd quarter, if you will, of this cycle.
Do you believe then if so here's where I start to wonder about the impact of the next president. When Mitt Romney was running against President Obama in 2012, they each were making different promises and predictions about what would happen under each of their watches if they were to be reelected or elected for the first time for Mitt Romney. However, economic indicators did suggest that in the immediate aftermath of that election, jobs were going to continue being created and generally things were going to be okay. So to some extent, we know that there are significant differences between Republicans and Democrats in the White House. At the same time, though, sometimes we do see some inevitability. Do you see that 9 to 12 year bull market as inevitable, regardless of who the next president is?
That's a good question. I think that, again, our studies have shown that Democratic presidents have been better stewards of our economy. And when I say that, I mean that they have been better at creating more consistent, more predictable, and more stable growth. Whereas when we've had Republican presidents, whether it be Hoover going back or Coolidge going back quite a long time, or Reagan or George W. Bush, what we see is more boom and then followed by great bust. And I think that most Americans don't want that. They would like to have the consistency of knowing that a cycle is going to last more than 4 or 5 years, that in fact it could last 8 or 9 or 10. And I think that that's what's going to happen in this cycle. Going back to your question, though, I think that the probability of a Republican being elected in 2016, with all due respect now, with those that they're putting up so far, is pretty remote. But I guess we'll see what happens next year.
Yeah, it's still very, very early. Certainly Ted Cruz does not seem to be the guy that is going to be the president. Let's play devil's advocate on a couple of different things. You said for the most part, this has been a sort of organic run-up. However, we still have what some would consider artificially low interest rates, and this is impacting both banks taking out loans with which they can then loan out more money, as well as mortgage interest rates, etc. Is that not an example of a slightly artificial component to the current economic status quo?
Well, keep in mind that if you take a look at the 10-year Treasury, which today is right around in the United States around 1.93, 1.94%, and it was as high as 3% not too long ago.
Right.
Again, the reality is, if you take a look at the 10-year note in other countries, whether we're looking at Germany, France, Great Britain, Japan, we are higher than almost every single industrialized country in the world. So the pressure for us to raise rates is really not that high, when in fact the reality is most foreign investors can get a very attractive rate here in the United States relative to where they are in their own countries. So there's just, as long as the rest of the world is growing at this modest pace, I don't think there's a lot of pressure on interest rates going up dramatically.
And last thing, and this is really one of the most important elements of this recovery now, which is that although wages have started to trickle up, wage growth is certainly lagging other economic indicators. And this is a common thing in early years of an economic recovery. Whether we're still in the early part of this economic recovery is starting to become a little bit dubious. What's your thought on this wage lag that we're seeing?
Well, good question. I think that, again, keep in mind that the stock market is always a leading indicator of where the economy is heading. Unemployment or employment and wages are a lagging indicator. So we think that wages will follow, that we are beginning to see some growth in wages here in the last couple months. But the reality is what we really do need, and something we have had in some states, is we do need an increase in the minimum wage. That would force all businesses to increase wages, which would be good, I think, across the board for the entire country. But again, this Congress has been very reluctant to even touch any increase in the minimum wage. And that probably we're not going to see anything there, I don't think, until at least 2016 or 2017, I should say.
Well, without question, we're going to continue following all of these stories. We've been speaking with Bob Deitrick from Polaris Financial Partners. PolarisFinancial.net is the website. And check out the book, Bulls, Bears, and the Ballot Box. It really kind of gives you a lot of the foundation for this thinking around party, presidential party, and the economy. Bob, thanks so much for being on with us again.
Dave, it was a pleasure to be with you once again. Thanks so much for having us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Have you ever heard of reversible abortions? The Washington Post is reporting that the Arizona legislature just passed a bill that is another attempt at trying to ban women from using their health insurance to pay for the legal medical procedure of abortion. Doctors in Arizona, as a result of this bill, might be required to tell women that abortions can be reversed, which, by the way, if you didn't know, is not true. The anti-abortion activists are backed by a doctor whose name is George Delgado. They're claiming that medication abortions, where medication is taken to perform the abortion, can be reversed. So the backstory is that women having medication abortions take two pills. One is mifepristone, and then another one is misoprostol. The people claiming that you can reverse an abortion say that women often take that first dose, the first pill, and then they become so guilt-ridden and they become desperate to save their pregnancies that Dr. Delgado, savior, gives the women progesterone shots, which supposedly reverses the effects of mifepristone. A few problems with the story. Number one, mifepristone by itself is usually not enough to actually do the abortion, okay? So you're not really reversing the abortion by getting the progesterone shots. It's that you're not completing the abortion by having the second pill. That's number one. You're really just stopping the process before it's complete. But the other thing is, the progesterone shots not only don't reverse anything, they're medically unnecessary theater. They're just trying to portray anti-choicers, including this Dr. Delgado, as some kind of hero who shows up with syringes and is able to stop abortions. He's just popping all these women full of progesterone, and he's saving babies left and right. This entire thing is a complete farce. There is no evidence of much demand from women to be interrupting abortions. Unlike anti-choicers want you to believe, women actually do take the decision to have an abortion quite seriously, regardless of what anecdotal stories you may be able to tell me. And forcing doctors to, quote, inform, and I use that term very loosely because they're really just kind of lying, to inform patients about an intervention that is not medically useful, it is not in demand, and serves no purpose other than anti-choice histrionics, is ridiculous. Women should have the freedom to get through an abortion, a legal medical procedure, without right-wing delusion being forcibly imposed on them. And I actually started thinking about this. If women believe that abortions are reversible, wouldn't that make it more appealing to them to go forward with the abortion process? I think that this is not only absurd in terms of what it forces on women and its scienceless basis, but it actually might have somewhat of a counter impact. And then imagine these women who go and they start the medication abortion process, and then maybe they don't know even when it is that they're supposed to get the reversal shot. They take both pills and they go to the doctor and they say, hey, I heard, Dr. Delgado can reverse the abortion. I'd like to have mine reversed. No, it's too late for that now, actually. I think that this may accomplish the exact opposite of what the anti-choicers are actually looking for. Here's something novel from a small government Republican. Mandate church attendance. Arizona State Senator Sylvia Allen is a Republican who thinks the government should, of course, stay completely out of people's lives, except when it comes, apparently, to attending church. During a debate about, those insane bills where they want people carrying guns concealed anywhere, bars, schools, movie theaters, wherever, State Senator Allen got upset and said, quote, probably we should be debating a bill requiring every American to attend a church of their choice on Sunday to see if we can get back to having a moral rebirth. She hinted that guns in public buildings might be necessary until there's a moral rebirth, which could be brought on by forcing people to go to church. At least, I guess this is kind of nice of them, at least she thinks that people would have a choice about which church to go to. She also said later to the Arizona Capital Times that she wishes things were more like they were in the 1950s. No surprise there, ladies and gentlemen. The religious right is obsessed with making things like the 1950s. I'll remind you, I'm no expert in the 1950s, but I've studied the 1950s to some extent. The 1950s, rife with civil rights problems, women's rights problems, voting rights problems, segregated schools. But it's the time period that these people are obsessed with. And after I heard this woman saying, we should have mandatory church, all I could think was, God help us. And maybe that's something that would resonate with her. Although maybe we're being too hard on Senator Allen because education has been dismantled so significantly that maybe she was just never taught about the First Amendment and the separation of church and state in school. And maybe we're being too harsh on her. But there's an idea from the right. Small government, right? They don't want the government involved in the minutia of people's everyday lives, except no gay marriage, no abortion, mandatory church. Here's how you teach history in school. Here's how you teach science in school. Hands off, though, right? No regulation at all. Unless it's absolutely necessary, we don't get involved. I've got a voicemail number. That number is 219-2DavidP. And today I have a voicemail from someone who is very confused about what this program is and also very confused about the First Amendment. I think you'll like this one. Take a listen.
Hey, David, you have a very, really slanted show to the left.
So let's stop there. This is an opinion show. It is a progressive opinion show. So the show is slanted to the left. Well, it is a liberal talk show. Let's continue.
You give no, I guess I call chance for another opinion. You have battled in your show for your view and your view only. You want to call yourself someone that believes in the Constitution of the United States of America? Call you a fraud.
Right. So this person is very, very confused. There is no connection whatsoever between this is my show, right, and I give my opinion. There's no law that says that I need to equally represent retrograde and bogus right-wing views. It has nothing to do at all with the Constitution. I am not the government. I am not oppressing anyone or restricting anyone's right to free speech or exercise thereof or of their religion or whatever. There's nothing fraudulent at all about this program, okay? So when we talk about confusion around the First Amendment, I think that we need to remember this voicemail as a prime example of the problem we have in this country. We're actually going to be interviewing a famed legal scholar. I'll tell you who it is when we get closer to this interview, about the misunderstandings around the First Amendment that are happening in this country right now. On today's bonus show, a school suspends an 11-year-old boy for a year because he had a leaf with him that looked like it was a marijuana leaf, but it was not. It was just a tree leaf. We will also talk about NYU, New York University staff fundraising for students now that room and board is expected to be $71,000 next year. Absolutely ridiculous. More info on updates to our membership program. So much going on. Remember, davidpakman.com/membership to sign up. Vote with your dollars. Support independent media today. We really do appreciate every one of our members.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.